So what I'm going to do now, this is all kind of warm up and generating material for my one-man show, which starts on the 12th of August at Greenside at Riddles Court, Clover Studio, 1:45, quarter to 2 in the afternoon, every day from the 12th to the 24th of August, but not the 18th, that's a Sunday. And what I'm going to do now, let me just show you, is I've got all of the topics that are in my book written on different bits of paper, and for about 15 minutes I'm just going to keep drawing topics at random and talking about them, just to kind of air them over in my head. I'm still not at the point yet where I've decided exactly what I'm going to say in my one-man show, so let's pick one of these. Try to do it with my right hand, which is not, of the two, not the most easy hand. So the pirate ship is that's the pirate ship. Okay, so this is the first chapter in the book, and the idea of the pirate ship is there are two main. Well, there's kind of one main idea in the pirate ship, and it's an idea that comes from improvisation. So in improvisation, basically, if you imagine this is almost like a nightmare for some people. You're on a stage and you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, you have to make it up. And this is quite frightening, even for experienced improvisers. This is quite a frightening thing. And so one of the dangers, one of the things that can happen is that people can kind of slip into this state which feels safer than kind of just standing around looking hopeless and not knowing what to do. But it's boring for the audience, and so ultimately it isn't safe for the people who are on the stage. So the example that I give in the book is, let's say, so often what you do when you're doing an improvised scene is you ask for some kind of workplace, some place that people might be working from the audience, and somebody says the deck of a ship. So you have some improvisers on the deck of the ship. And somebody might say that, they look through an imaginary telescope, and somebody might say, oh, look, on the horizon, there's a pirate ship. And then somebody else might say, let's scrub the decks. And then the other improvisers might say, yes, let's. And so they go on scrubbing the decks rather than dealing with the pirate ship that is coming towards them. Now, of course, the audience want to know what they're going to do about the pirate ship. That's a very important aspect of improvisation, is doing something that's at least connected with what the audience expect you to do. But the people on the stage are tempted to do this thing which is safer because they can keep doing it repeatedly. They don't have to keep thinking of new things to do. And one of the authors in the British strand of thinking about improvisation, a chap called Keith Johnston, in his book, he calls this, in his book, I think it's his second book, Improv for Storytelling, he calls this agreed activity. So what's happening here is that a bunch of people who are scared, they're agreeing to do something that looks like they're doing something, but it's kind of repetitive. It's not actually pushing the story forward. And ultimately, it will be dangerous. It will be bad for the performance because it's boring, and so it will bore the audience. What they really need to do is to prepare for the pirate ship arriving, or even, because this is drama, this is not real life, they can cut to the pirate ship arriving. They can cut to the pirate ship arriving. They can fight with the pirates. They can win or they can lose. They can become pirates themselves. The pirates can be really surprising. They can be tiny and easily defeated, or in some way unusual. But that is all moving the story forward. But it's all challenging. It needs thought. It needs lots and lots of decisions, one after the other. And so there's this real temptation for people to not do that and instead do some kind of agreed activity. Now, why am I talking about improvisation? How's this got any connection with software development? Well, it's got connection with software development and projects in this way, that very often what's going on with software development is that the team do notice a pirate ship. They notice some danger that's coming towards the project that they need to deal with. And sometimes they have the courage to point this out. They point this out to senior people, that there's this pirate ship coming, there's some problem. Maybe I can be explicit here and say something like, the Wi-Fi in the office doesn't work. We can't actually do any development here. Or this new super duper technology that you thought was going to fix everything doesn't work. It's really just a series of slide presentations. There's no actual technology there that works. AI. But very often what happens when the crew do point out a pirate ship on the horizon is that they're not thanked for this. They're not thanked for pointing out the bad news. They're not thanked for pointing out errors. They're not thanked for pointing out dangers. And instead, what happens is they get growled at as messengers, or sometimes they get shot. Sometimes people who point out the problems with the project just get kicked off the project or fired. If you want to think about what the fastest kind of learning that anybody can do is, it's the kind of learning that teams achieve when they try and point out some bad news and the response from senior management is not positive. Absolutely, once that's happened once, and we've noted when we're talking about improvisation that it's a tendency anyway, they will go back to this agreed activity. So it will look like work is happening, but no work is actually happening. Because the only way really to move a performance and the story forward, or the only way to move a project forward, is to tackle the pirate ships. It's to tackle the things on the horizon. So yes, it looks like stuff is going on and stuff is happening, but actually none of that is happening. And so this is a really, in a way, it's a really, really simple thing. It's how do you make projects more successful? This is a way of looking at projects that can make us smarter. How do you make projects more successful? You deal with the pirate ships. You deal with the problems that are on the horizon. How do you make projects nearly guaranteed to not be successful? You growl at messengers or punish them in some other way. And so they make absolutely sure that they're never going to tell you anything again. And so many projects are just in this form of agreed activity and aren't going anywhere. Okay, so that was pirate ships. Let's do an... Okay, so this might be the most complicated and involved idea that I have in the whole book. And it's kind of so complicated and involved. I'm not really selling this to you, but it's a simple thing, and I'll talk about the simple thing in a minute. But there's so much kind of in it. It's at least 2 chapters. It should be at least 2 chapters in my book, and it's probably a whole book. But anyway, this is the idea. You're probably not familiar with the Chilean psychoanalyst and psychologist Ignacio Mat Blanco. Maybe I'm kind of underestimating the width of your reading, but I wasn't aware of him until a friend mentioned him to me. And Ignacio Mat Blanco wrote a book called The Unconscious and Infinite Sets, which I have to admit I haven't read. I've read bits of it. It's a tough old read. But he has this fascinating, this absolutely very, very interesting, very, very applicable idea when it comes to project management. His idea is that there are essentially 2 ways of seeing the world. There's a way of seeing the world which he calls symmetrical, which is about all and same and forever. That's the symmetrical way of seeing the world. All, same, and forever. And then in contrast to that, there's an asymmetrical way of seeing the world, a non-mirroring way of seeing the world, which is some and different and for a short space of time. It's very interesting how, certainly in English, I don't know in other languages, how we struggle to kind of come up with the opposite of forever. There is no straightforward way of thinking about the opposite of forever. They all feel slightly uncomfortable, temporary for a bit. And basically, the idea that's the kind of first notion, is that there are these two different ways of seeing the world: all, same, and forever, and some different and for a bit of time. But the extra thing that Ignacio Blanco adds to this is the idea that our unconscious mind — he was a Freudian, I don't really know much about Freud, and I'm probably using the term in a wrong way, but the unconscious mind favors one of these ways of seeing the world over the other. And the unconscious mind favors seeing the world in terms of all, same, and forever. And once you start to use this lens to look at project management, a whole bunch of things that otherwise would just not make any sense at all start to make some kind of sense. So from the point of view of project management, when I do project management, I use this kind of method called Agile, one of the parts of the Agile method are that when you have a list of things that you want to do, you want the software to do, you should prioritize that list. So you do some things first, and then you do other things later. And everybody who's tried to get the people who want the project, the people who are the bosses on a project, to prioritize that list, everybody has heard the same response to this, which is, I don't want to prioritize that list. I just want everything on that list. And that is saying, I don't want some, I want all. And in a way, it explains things so kind of simply and so powerfully, to realize that this is not a conscious thing. This is an unconscious thing. And one of the things that we're having to do when we're doing projects is to persuade people to do some thinking, a little bit of thinking, not just have an unconscious reaction to things, but do some thinking. And one of the other things that I realized when I started thinking about this idea of all and same and forever versus some and different and for a short space of time is that this really fits with something called the Agile Manifesto. So the Agile Manifesto is a 90-something word statement about preferring certain kinds of approaches over other kinds of approaches. It's not dogmatic, and by not being dogmatic, it's not symmetrical. It's not saying all of this is right forever. It's saying we're uncovering some things. I think that's how it starts. And the four values that are talked about in the Agile Manifesto. I did a course a while ago, and somebody came up with a wonderful mnemonic for this, so I can remember them. In winter comes in winter comes Rudolph. So the first value is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this is kind of focusing on some rather than all, because it's saying, look, it's the actual discussions that happen between the people involved in a project that are going to make the project happen. It's not just about getting a list of requirements and then some fancy tools and turning the handles on the tools and the right thing happening. That's not what's going to happen. The second value is working software over detailed documentation. Now, again, this is a sum thing. This is rather than saying, like, write down absolutely everything that you want this system to do, which is detailed documentation, which, by the way, is not possible. What you're trying to do is do some of it, get some of it working. So you're focusing on this asymmetrical thing, this different thing, rather than like going on everything. And again, so much of the time when you're doing project management, you see people wrong-footed by this, unconsciously believing that the way to do this is to write down absolutely everything that you want this project to do. In winter Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So this is very similar. This is basically saying, look, what we need to do is we need to talk to the customers, the people who want this stuff, and we need to find what's valuable for them. And that's not going to be written down either in detailed documentation that we mentioned in the previous value or in contracts. It's not going to be able to be completely captured by contracts. And then in winter comes Rudolph. And then the final one is responding to change over following a plan. So one of the interesting things, if you think about this idea of things being all and the same and forever, is that if things are forever, then there is no change. So thinking about things in that way doesn't really countenance any change. But what happens, the reality with software development projects, is that we come across changes all the time. Changes in deadline, changes in understanding, changes in the organization, changing in priorities in the software, security change priorities. We've had a massive software outage over the last couple of weeks. So change is a really big part of this. So this is a kind of slightly different way of seeing things from the other ways of seeing that are in the book. But it's really but it's one of these things that kind of, once you start to think about it, you see so many things that, why are they a problem? Because people tend towards a symmetrical view unconsciously. They haven't done any thinking about this. This is the crucial thing. And part of what you're trying to do in software development, in project management, is trying to get them to think about this. Trying to get them to think about, rather than just this entire list of things that they want, what is it really? What's the most important thing? Which of these things could we get working that would be really valuable? Trying to get them away from thinking about things in terms of the contract and detailed documentation, and in terms of, at every stage, doing something which is maximally delivering extra value towards the project.